Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be talking about the Bitcoin price chart along with the XRP price chart, which has been humming along and got to almost $2.50 over the weekend, which is the price number we were talking about last week. So we'll touch on that. We'll incorporate some of the things we're seeing over there in the stock market, in macro markets. And we talked about this at the end of last week, how oversold we got, the bullish divergence, a little bit of a pop in here. We started off the week with a little bit of green over here in the Russell 2000 and the Dow and the S&P, down about 1/3% over there in the NASDAQ. Question is, will we see a lot of price action come out of the market this week? Are we kind of just in a little bit of a pause moment right now? As this week is Fed week, we'll have the meeting here in 2 days and 2 hours from me recording right now, where the Fed is expected to remain paused. Everybody's going to be listening for language to see if they're going to be ending QT or quantitative tightening anytime soon. Now, what's fascinating is there any inside information in there? Because if we go over to Polymarket, the betting market, which of course got the presidential election correct, it even got all the swing states correct over there, it has it priced in that there's a 100% chance that the Fed will end quantitative tightening before May. Well, I can look forward to the next meetings that will be there for the Fed and the next press conferences that they'll have and rate decisions that they'll have. And this is the last one that they have before we get to May. So before May, 100%, which when we get these press releases from the Fed, they always say the committee will continue reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities. Essentially knocking that off, not necessarily reducing rates, which it's placed at a 99% probability that they will still remain paused. And while we have seen things like the US 10-year yield drop 0.25% since the last meeting on January 29th, we've noticed that it's really kind of followed along exactly with what the 2-month yield is doing for some reason. Beyond my understanding, not a Fed expert, but that seems to be the correlation there. And that thing has still just stayed exactly where it's been since January 29th, which 99% probability, still going to stay the same. But markets tend to be a little bit volatile in those weeks. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Of course, we've seen tons of volatility over the course of the last couple of weeks. That can be represented over here on the VIX, or the volatility index of the S&P 500, which getting up into volatility levels that are considered high over the last 2 years. We've really only seen volatility levels this high in the stock market 2 other times in the last 2 years. But things seem to be kind of tampering off right now. And that's what we noticed at the end of last week as well. Nothing's really changed with my thoughts over here on Bitcoin, just kind of patiently sitting around twiddling my thumbs, waiting for a reaction to come out. XRP, the idea was that if we could get our way back up into something equivalent to like $2.50, which $2.47, that's good enough for me, that we would likely see a pullback happen back down into the 220s to 230s, and then to try to build a base in there, to try to give you just a corrective example of what that could look like in here. This is a pretty decent one. Question is, are we still just kind of working on this? It's got to kind of sweep these lows here. It got as low as 226. Does it go sweep the lows a second time? I think it's reasonable to think it could, but just base building happening in here. Like I said, if we could get our way up to near 250, I'd start kind of breathing a sigh of relief, and certainly am. And then price structures are really behaving appropriately from there as well. Again, if you missed last week's video, it just seems like this is a correction happening in the market for really one last hurrah to eventually come in here. As we can see, most of the market has really kind of created standard corrective structures happening in here, even when you take into account Trump's pump and dump that took place on March 2nd. I think one of the hardest things for people to wrap their head around, and it should be difficult to wrap your head around, is just what's been going on over there in the United States stock market. Is this the end? Is this just a correction, right? If you look on Google, it's the most searched for recession that we've seen in quite some time. Kind of a little bit of panic happening over there in markets, and an immediate reaction from the general public is recession. The data doesn't suggest that we're in a recession just yet, but I think it's reasonable to think that some of the processes of market tops are starting to work themselves out. A lot of times in our minds, we think of market tops as being something where just everything pops and everything goes, but a lot of times it's a lot of sloshing around of capital. When Bitcoin was peaking over in here, it was building a top, but it was a topping process, and there was a ton of capital being sloshed around. The same thing happened over here for Bitcoin back in 2017. Breadth collapsed in the market right in here as the Bitcoin dominance soared then building a topping process. And as that topping process was working itself out after its first major correction, the Bitcoin dominance collapsed on itself, and it was a big wash into the rest of the market. The difficult thing about this market cycle is trying to apply all the same past things that have worked before since crypto's inception and assuming that things will just repeat themselves. 4-year block reward halving, 4-year cycle, everything does the same. But as we've talked about for the last couple of years, the breadth has not been there. It's been a different type of market cycle. We know that this is the first time where the Russell 2000 does not escape after the election. This is the first time the Russell 2000 does not escape with the rest of the market like we do in all past cycles. And so I, of course, have talked about the rotational top theory, which has been something I've talked about since October. And the first thing that you would likely see is the mega caps end up peaking out. I think it's reasonable to assume or guess that things like Tesla, Apple, and Nvidia have probably already topped, that the mega caps have already peaked. And we have seen this dynamic happen one other time to this level, and it happened back in 1999 when we were coming up at the peak of the dot-com bubble. It took the mega caps peaking out in order for the breadth to open up and for there to be more of a value play to happen in the market. And that's been my theory of what's going on in here, that we are working on like this big, broader equity market top, and that it eventually ends with breadth opening up throughout the market. Probably short-lived, couple of months. That corroborates the whole idea of what we're talking about over here with Bitcoin and everything just kind of playing out relatively quickly throughout here, right then. But this is a common way for cycles to come to an end. You get an extreme collapse in breadth. Everything goes into defense, which is the mega caps. The mega caps kind of peak out, and then the money broadens out. And then, boom, big rally, then it's all over. I think a thing that corroborates that as well is just a behavior we have seen with gold, the fact that it's run all the way to $3,000, that there's already been kind of the beginning of that capital rotation happening in there. But I do think we will see this eventually come over here for the Russell 2000, and everything that we've seen happen over the last several years has been a direct correlation in the crypto market to whatever is happening over here in the Russell 2000, as the altcoin market overlaid on top of the Russell gives that clear image. I think one of the difficult things is just saying how long is it going to have to take to base out in here, which then goes to how long do we have to base out in here for things like XRP before, right, things can start shifting their way up. And if they do, how long is it going to have to go throughout one of these things? I showed examples last week where you don't have to go this long, and I don't think you have to go this long. This is just a direct relationship to whatever ends up happening with the Russell. If the Russell breaks out earlier, this thing will go earlier too. And we know that because back in November, the Russell was breaking out. I posted over there, all right, you got all the conditions, XRP, it is time you may send. Within a couple of days, boom, we're flailing into a bull run because the Russell was breaking out. And I think that's the true signal, is to see the Russell 2000 start. And, you know, again, like with things like with XRP, we've looked at things like XRP versus Bitcoin with our examples and the dominance and all those things. And if this continued moving at this trajectory, again, this doesn't put you out very long. You know, predicting time always humbles me, but these things just insinuate that it wouldn't be some 4-month wait or something like that, right? If this thing moved at that velocity, and this is the only way I can really guess time. I can give examples, I can show structures and say how they've played out and say, hey, look, if we move at this exact same velocity, that's how much time you have. That's the only way I can guess time, which doesn't work most of the time, right? But if you moved at that velocity, it just doesn't insinuate spending that much time there. So we're coming out of extreme oversold conditions. This hasn't been this oversold since back in C19. I think if you have this figured out, you have the whole crypto market figured out. But the problem is anybody trying to figure it out as if this is the last 3 cycles that we've had in crypto, it's not going to work because it's already beyond that, right? So creating theory of just everything goes up for the sake of everything going up, it's probably not right. There has to be some type of market dynamic that makes sense when you mix in the things of gold moving, what equities are doing, why the Russell has been left behind, you know, what market dynamics do that. And that's typically in late stage bubbles, like here with the Dow Jones Industrial Average ever since the Great Financial Crisis. This whole run is bigger than the roaring 20s before the Great Depression ended up happening, right? So this bubble is bigger. And don't get me wrong, I think it'll pop. I think it'll be the same story of everything will just come tumbling down in here. But you have to say to yourself, why is this market dynamic happening right here? And it's having to understand how the ends of bubbles typically happen, and that it's very common for the breadth to collapse as you're going for that big parabolic push there near the end. Then the mega caps will have profit taking. Then the money rotates throughout the market and goes to mid and small caps. And then finally, it all comes to an end. But I just don't think we're there yet. I think for mega caps, there's like a relatively decent chance they have already topped. Like just structurally, it seems probable, but that's also a phase we've been waiting for. And I wrote about that back in October, that once those start profit taking, that's where we open up the door for this to be able to happen. And for those who tune into markets in the morning every Wednesday, we pull this chart up all the time. It's always the same story, waiting for this thing to go. And the reality is needing those mega caps to take profit. Now, a lot of people don't like hearing that because retail investors in general are all piled into the same thing. So I'm probably telling a lot of people who are listening to this, hey, are you piled into all the same trades everybody else is? Tesla, Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple. So is everybody else. But getting those to profit take opens up that door for things to be able to rotate throughout the rest of the place. And so that's where I think we are. It's just going to be how long is it going to take for this to happen? And it's not a story of being like, hey, this thing's then going to go raging off into a bull run. I mean, we're talking maybe getting to 2,500, 2,550, 2,600. And then, hey, we're all done. But it's like this would be the big rally. This would be like the market top, the market ending for Bitcoin, crypto, and then the cycle all resets. And it's not unreasonable to think that even if you are a 4-year cycle theorist, right? The altcoin market topped in May of 2021. Hey, we're in March of 2025. It's been 3 years and 10 months, right? If it plays out all rapidly and tops somewhere in April, May, June, July, or something like that, well, guess what? It's been 4 years. I mean, it makes sense, right? And it's like if Bitcoin does something like this, right? I mean, you got a bull run, right? That's what you got. And so it's just patiently waiting for prices to be able to move, macro to wake up, which it's already showing good reactions happening in here, right? The most oversold last Friday, we totally shot out of there today. Monday, we're starting off the story the same way. You could just see that over here on the indicators as well, even on these smaller time frames that things are breaking out. I mean, look at the 2-hour time frame here on the Russell 2000. I mean, it's totally gotten stuck underneath 60, and we talk about that all the time. What constitutes being bearish and what constitutes being bullish. When you're stuck underneath 60, you're bearish. And if you're holding supports on top of 40, you're bullish, right? So we've been stuck in this bearish zone in here. Finally, we're getting a little bit of a reversal price action to happen in here, along with the indicator behavior happening in here. So it seems like we found a floor, but we're just still waiting for the crypto market to respond and wake up in here. I'm feeling more optimistic that we will. I think we saw the price action that we were looking for to happen here show up over here on the XRP price chart. Satisfied with what I see in there, right? Like we talked about with Cardano, correction structures, ABCs. It seems like we've done all that stuff. But I do think we're just kind of stuck here in this moment right now, just kind of twiddling our thumbs. And I think the most important thing right now, and the thing that I'm really spending all of my time on, is continuing to build and strengthen my thesis of understanding why this market has not done what are typical expansionary moves like we have in all 3 past bull runs. We've been theorizing about it for a very long time, but I'm spending a lot of time now really zoning that in and focusing that in, because I believe we will see things get exciting again here in the market. And if we do, the narrative will probably be fantastic. The excitement levels will be through the roof. There will be every reason in the world to not do anything, hold on for dear life, and not sell when like all the technical suggests that it's probably the time to do it, right? And an example of that, like of how things can hit you so fast and surprise you, would be things like as Solana's trying to hit that all-time high, and then Trump coin gets launched, right? That narrative is so good. It's like, oh my goodness, Solana is so great. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Boom. That was the literal peaking moment for Solana, right? And so just kind of expecting that, just being like, hey, like what's the context of the whole market? It's as if mega caps have already peaked. Now we're waiting to see the rotation happen throughout the rest of the market into more value. And when that happens for things like Russell 2000, that tends to translate over into the crypto market. And then when that happens, that's where we see all this occur. And it's likely where we see things like XRP go for their breakouts, Cardano, altcoins, etc. And I feel good about it. I think that's what's going to happen. But I think short term this week, we're all just kind of sitting around twiddling our thumbs, waiting for these narratives to get through. We know that markets can be kind of volatile or just kind of paused out, waiting to get through these events. We can have volatility before, during, after, or the market is actually just kind of sitting back waiting to see what is going to end up happening. But I feel good that we're going to get what we came here for. We're just waiting for the market to wake up. And I do know that when we really kind of focus on macro, like these videos don't get the most views. They aren't like the most exciting things to talk about. It also goes against a lot of the beliefs that people do have, right? I think a lot of people have gotten on board with the idea that clearly there is a correlation that happens here between macro and between crypto, but there's some people that still just kind of live in denial that that's not true. So these videos are kind of hit and miss when we talk about these things. But I do think it's completely the big picture that has to be focused on, and having to have the understanding of what is happening in macro and why this is all happening in here and why this time is different from all three past ones. That puzzle has to be solved. I don't know how anybody can invest in this market right now without having a thesis on why that is happening. And I think the thesis of 4-year block reward halving cycles is just a massively weak thesis. But that why this market has been so weak when you have the major indexes able to get out, but a complete collapse in breadth. And what does that mean? And based on historical bubbles, what that means is that you are approaching peaks. It's a consolidation into defense mega caps. And then what typically happens is the mega caps unleash, unwind. Then the market rotates into value, small and mid caps. You get a last hurrah in the market. And that's how we can get these types of things to play out. So it's kind of where I'm spending all my time right now, because it feels like we've gone through kind of a major event here in the last couple of weeks with what has happened in the stock market, where you got Apple setting these new lows, Nvidia's really pulled back, right? Tesla's really down, right? This is where a lot of retail is. And it's a big moment in here right now. And so I do get it. This is not everybody's favorite thing to talk about, but I personally find it to be the biggest story in all of markets right now. And I think whoever can get this right will get the crypto market right too. But I think the thing people care about the most is, right, does that mean number go up? And my thoughts are, yeah, probably. If this is the peak of the equity market, if we are seeing the mega caps start to unwind and we see the rotation happen throughout the market for at least a couple of months, and the Russell 2000 sets this thing, number go up for Bitcoin, number go up for XRP, number go up for Cardano and the altcoin market. I think the most difficult thing in times like that is that we're talking about this time is different, right? And so I always kind of like to talk about these things ahead of time, right? The most dangerous words any retail investor can ever say are this time is different. And that's typically when we're talking about things like ETFs, or we're talking about Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, or we're talking about, last cycle, El Salvador, Tesla adding it to the balance sheet, right? Those are always the this time is different narratives. And I'm not talking about that stuff when we're talking about the charts. We're talking about a market dynamic that is different. We've had the exact same market dynamic happen every 4 years. So everybody applies these exact same 4-year cycle stuff because they say, hey, we're going to do the same thing that we always do because we do it every 4 years. Well, that's because macro markets did it too. They did the exact same thing every 4 years, and crypto benefited from it, but it's behaving differently this time. And so in the event that this comes, right, it's going to be like, oh, we are just starting. We're just beginning, right? This time is different because of ETFs. This time is different because of Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Or even if they do come out and say, there is a real crypto strategic reserve and they name assets in it, right? This time will be different, right? And that it's typically that narrative or whatever that is that comes out at the peak that this time is different. That will usually mark the top whenever it happens. So anyway, this is my main focus right now. Like, this is where I'm putting all my energy and time in right now, strengthening my thesis for this. I feel good about it, but I also do think once it does play out, and then once markets pull back, I think that retail and everybody's going to be sitting there looking to buy the dip after all of that occurs. And I think that's actually going to be the time to step away from the markets for quite some time. And so, like, even in my last newsletter, I wrote about that. Like, how do I portray that? Like, I'm not the best hype man sometimes. It's like, how do we portray that? Do we portray this as like most epic rally coming, right? The thing that we've all waited for is right around the corner. Big, glorious candles inbound. Or do we portray it as like, hey, after that happens, it's like we're all doomed, right? And so it's just trying to talk about it in a neutral way of like trying to just build the thesis and talk about it like, hey, like this is where my mind is at. And like I talk about that, like I've been saying that recently. If you're watching this channel, like this is what I'm basing my ideas off of, right? So when you tune into this channel, understand this is what my thesis is. And so it really is my main focus right now. And I do challenge anybody to do their own research, strengthen your own arguments, ask yourself why these things are happening in here, and what does it typically mean when markets are doing that? And I just continuously get pulled back to the exact same conclusion every single time. We're building a market top in the equity market, especially with the mega caps, and those type of market dynamics typically lead to a rotation into small and mid-sized caps. And we know that the crypto market performs well in moments where that does occur. but to also have that mindset of when that does occur, we're likely approaching a peak for quite some time. And that makes sense for even the 4-year cycle people because we're almost there. So, most epic rally inbound, right? I don't know. I hope you follow what I'm saying. It's what my last newsletter was about that I published on Saturday. It's going to be things that we're going to be talking about for quite some time moving forward because I sincerely believe if we have this figured out, we have crypto figured out at the exact same time. I feel good about it, but I think it's like a crazy pivotal moment in history for like the decade to come. I think we're kind of living within that year where like this year marks like a pivotal change happening in markets that will last a decade. And that's a crazy time to be in. So anyway, I'll wrap it all up. You can check out the newsletter. It was published over there on Saturday at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Includes a 30-minute audio recording that I personally recorded to go along with it. There's a link down here in the description of this video to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. This week, we'll see if we can get any traction before the Fed meeting happens. We'll see if Polymarket's right in regards to QT coming to an end. We always live stream those things. So on Wednesday, it's a really busy day for me. We do markets in the morning, and then just a few hours later, we come on for an hour or two for all the Fed action at the same time. So prepare for Wednesday. I'll be with you guys all day. If markets just kind of remain stagnant tomorrow, maybe I'll just kind of observe. We'll see on a video. But if we've got price movement, of course, I'll come out. But otherwise, check out the newsletter. Have a wonderful day. Welcome to the new week. We're starting the week off green. We ended last week green after the last couple of weeks being kind of pretty volatile. So good start. And hopefully we can continue that throughout the week. So, all right, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.